Okay, I think we might be live on my end. So, hi folks, if you're joining us now, let me get set up here. Do, do, do. Um, So yeah, I just want to chat with you folks for a bit, just about what's coming up on the channel. There's going to be a few things coming up, and let me know in the comments there if you got any questions for me or anything like that, and if you can hear me properly. Because yeah, as I say, I'm gonna chat about what's coming up on the channel for the near future anyway. And then we've obviously got the live Q&A with Karl Gruner at 20 minutes time. He was a former F-16 and F-111 pilot, so you can get your questions coming in already for that. So in terms of the channel, we're going to be really busy actually, which is great. Next Sunday we've got Paddy O'Flynn's first part coming out on what it was like to fly and instruct on the Tornado F3 in Saudi Arabia, because he had an exchange over there. And then the Sunday after that will be part 2. We've also got, still in talks with Michael Vizcarra, who was, F-14A, B and D Rio. And then he went on to the F-18 Super Hornet to be a Rio there. So that's coming up. I'm still in talks with Michael about that, which will be great. But hopefully we're going to be recording probably around the 10th or 12th or something like that of December. And then we've got Cabo, who is the F-22 demo pilot. That's going to be great. We're actually recording that on the 2nd of December. And let me get my schedule up here, guys, to let you know when that is. So unless you, because I normally post in the community post on YouTube, but I'll just name off what we've got coming up. So Paddy O'Flynn, part 1 on the 28th of November. Part 2 will be on the 5th of December. Then we got Cabo on the F-22, which will be part 1 on the 12th of December. And Cabo's part 2 on the 19th of December. And then if all goes well, obviously I need to talk to Michael Vizcarra before, so if we can get the dates lined up. His will be, part 1 will be on the 22nd of December and part 2 on the 2nd of January. And obviously I'm going, well, unless you know, but I'm going away from the 14th to the 28th to Singapore to visit my parents. So once we get back, I'm going to be filming a lot more in-person interviews. So our first one's going to be with Mike Sutton. He's a former Typhoon pilot, and yeah, great story. He's just released a book. I'm just going to read it here. So it's Wing Commander Mike Sutton, Typhoon, the book's called. The inside story of an RAF fighter squadron at war. So we're going to talk about, the Typhoon at war, rather than just talk about the aircraft itself, which would be hopefully fascinating for you guys. And that'll be our first one in January, hopefully. No dates yet set, but that's going to be the first in-person one for the year. We do have a lot of other guests coming up, which is going to be great. But I can't name any names yet, unfortunately, because we're still in talks, and I want to keep the confidentiality, between us. But yeah, some great stuff coming up. We're also going to be doing, as we normally do every year, a Christmas giveaway. So I've got some stuff to do a package. It's be like one guest or viewer wins. Still working on that, so looking at dates and what's going to be in the prize giveaway. So yeah, keep an eye out for that. And if you want to follow us on, because we do it across our Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter accounts. So if you just search Aircrew Interview on whatever platform you're on, you'll see the competition. We normally start at around the 1st of December. So that should be good. So just keep an eye out for that. And other stuff. Yeah, we've got a lot more clothing and product designs coming out from our graphic designers. So keep an eye out for them. Just go to, search AC Interview on the Redbubble store. We've got some great stuff there, and it gives you a chance to hopefully buy some merchandise and also support the channel. So yeah, some great stuff coming up. Been keeping busy as usual, and yeah, tonight. So we got Karl Gruner coming on for a live Q&A. Unless you didn't see his two-part interview and the first Q&A we did a while ago. Yeah, he's a former F-111A and F pilot, and also F-16C. So that'll be a great Q&A. So if you've got any questions for Karl, may as well get them in now. But if you guys have got any questions for me, put them in the comments there and I'll try and answer them. So I'm trying to think what else we got coming up. Bear with me, I did have everything sorted here, but I've got like 3,000 screens, so bear with me. Yeah, and we're gonna do where is it? So in the first week of January, I'm going to be doing a live Q&A as well. I'm going to be doing a giveaway of a patch and some other goodies as well, just to start the new year like on a good note. So yeah, plenty to come and plenty to see. But if you've got any questions, get them in. Ask me. You probably don't, but because I might have said everything. But yeah, let me know. I'm going to ramble for a bit. So what have I got? Oh yeah, I obviously interviewed Paddy O'Flynn. If you've seen it in the community section on yesterday, that was great. Paddy, we had a great interview. It's about a 15-minute interview, so it's really interesting to hear about an RAF F3 pilot going on exchange flying the Saudi F3. So hopefully you're going to enjoy that, and I will be putting out a teaser clip next Wednesday from that, how the exchange came about and the differences from the RAF F3 to the Saudi F3. So hopefully you'll enjoy that. So look out for that on Wednesday at 7 o'clock UK time. So yeah, what else is coming up? Yeah, I'm hoping to, I guess this is probably later on in the year, like once things settle down, but probably mid next year, summertime, I'm looking to get away, because I like to try and get to another country and interview in person a pilot or a nav or whatever of a different air force. So I'm trying that at the moment, so we'll see what happens. So if you have any suggestions of what air force or what aircraft, let me know in the comments, because I'd be interested in that. What you guys like. I have a few thoughts, but it'd be interesting to see what you guys would like to see, you know, coming up on the channel from a different air force rather than RAF, American, blah blah blah. So let me know. So what I'm gonna do here. Oh, cheers, Freckle Prune. Yeah, the F-22 one. Yeah, Cabo should be great. Yeah, that should be really great. Yeah, it was. We eventually sorted out a date for the 2nd of December to record, so that's going to be great. But I don't know how much we're going to be able to talk about in terms of tactics, so we'll see. I don't know. It's obviously dependent on Cabo and the team, so we'll see what happens. I love the Tornado F3 walk around. Yeah, that was fun. It was at my local museum at Nelsam, and it was really a surprise. Obviously, the F3 is my favorite aircraft. So it was fun to, you know, have one at your local museum. So I spent I think about 30 minutes just admiring it. I was like, right, how many pictures can I do? I wanted to get more video, but there was some people there and I didn't want to get in the way. So, you know, like I wanted them to enjoy it as well. Any chance of interviews with pilots of old aircraft from the 50s and 60s? Yes, I'm talking to someone at the moment. That is a possibility. I can't say what at the moment, but yes, that is a possibility. So we'll see there. F-35, Joe, not heard anything back yet from that, if that's what you're talking about. Nothing yet, no email back. We'd love to see more heavy bombers, past and present. Yeah, definitely. I mean, one of my goals is a B-1B pilot nav, or the whistles in the back. Yeah, I would love to do that, but I don't know. I found that quite a difficult one actually to come by. They seem to be hard to get hold of. We've done the B-52, but again, like just a pilot, so I want to get like more B-52 guys. B2, I would love to do that. Don't know how likely that'll be, but we'll see. That'll be great. Yeah, definitely. I've got like I always like have feelers out there, so I'm always searching for people I think would be great. One teaser I can give, without naming anyone, but we might have a Norwegian pilot on in the near future, so look out for that. We've never been to Norway before, so that'll be great. Cold War stories, perhaps? Yeah, I mean, a lot of the people I interview are Cold War guys, and hopefully they give great stories. But yeah, I mean, there's always like so many people I want to interview, and some are not available. It's just difficult. But yeah, Cold War stories, yeah, that'd be great. Once across the channel interview, Cold War stories packed. Force pilots and defense goods. Yeah. Well, John Minter there, yeah, an aggressor pilot. That could be in the works. So yeah, I can't say any more because I don't want to put out it's definitely going to happen. I can't name names, but yeah, I do want an aggressor pilot. F-16 or F-111. Oh, I'm thinking you're waiting for Karl. He should be coming on very soon. So what I'm going to do is, if you get any more questions for me, just put them in. But I'm going to try and get in contact with Karl so we can get a live Q&A going with you. If you could get anyone involved in a TLC team, yeah, I bet. Yeah. Unfortunately, I've never come across anyone that took part in any of the projects. So yeah, that would be great. Like that. Yeah, that would be great. And yeah, people will be straight on that, wouldn't they? So yeah, it's something to look out for. But again, like I generally do, I interview people or crews and whatever because I enjoy it, you know, in interviewing them and talking about their stories. So I generally don't, I don't know how to put it. I don't go for like, oh, this is going to get loads of views. I go for, okay, this person will be interesting. If people like it, that's great. That's if you don't, that's fine. But I don't try to get big hitters just for views and or you know that kind of thing because I think then you lose something. So I just do it for myself really, and obviously you guys. And if I think I like it, then hopefully you guys will like it too. Hope that makes sense anyway. Yeah, I've heard about that. Yeah, I would love to do that. And 1980, yeah, definitely. That'd be interesting. Right, okay. I'm going to try and get Karl up, so bear with me, folks. Thank you for the few questions you gave me. But you're obviously waiting for Karl, which is the main feature of this chat. So bear with me, and Karl might go on for a bit longer as well. He said he can stay maybe 20 minutes, half an hour extra. So we'll see how the Q&A goes. But get your questions in for Karl because I'm going to give a call now. So bear with me, folks. Right, where's Karl at? Again, thanks for supporting us, guys. I really appreciate all your continued support. It's great, and we have a great community, I think, with all those little av geeks. We're a small channel, but yeah, we got some great people. So cheers. Right, let's see if we can get Karl on. Bear with me, folks. Right, okay, will be 2 seconds. There's always technical difficulties, but we'll work through it, don't worry. And we should have a great Q&A with Karl, and it should work. Right, I think we're in there. Hi, Karl.
Hi. Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you. Okay, folks, we're with Karl now, so I'm going to try to introduce him. So give us 2 seconds here, folks. Right, so Karl should be with you now. So obviously, if you don't know Karl, he's a former F-111 A and F Is it F pilot? Yeah, I think it was correct. Yeah, F.
Yeah, I was in the F-111A and F.
Yes, and
Never
also
flew
F
the E or D or the FB, the
and
other US
F-16 pilot.
variants.
Yeah.
Yes, F-16C and D.
So yeah, so if you get your questions coming in for Karl, but Karl, while we get the questions coming in, can you maybe just for our, because we get new viewers all the time, so maybe can you just give us a couple of minutes of your background just so the questions come in? That'd be great.
Right. So my my background, for the first question people may have in their mind when they hear me is, of course, the accent. So I think most people know by now, but I grew up in France. I was actually a dual citizen, French-American, for quite a while in my youth, and then decided to go to the U.S. and attended college in the U.S. at the University of California, Berkeley. I went through the Reserve Officer Training Corps, ROTC program there for 4 years. Had a pilot scholarship. Ended up going to pilot training in the Air Force. Um, Even though one of my early loves in the airplanes, which started way back, was the F-14 Tomcat. So I kind of wanted to go Navy, but ended up for various reasons I won't get into the Air Force. And after completing pilot training, I went to the F-111A first at Mountain Home Air Force Base in Idaho. I did 2 tours in the F-111. My second tour was at RAF Lakenheath in the UK on the F model. And then I ended up doing a ground tour with the Army to get me into the F-16, and that worked out okay. I flew the F-16C at Han Air Base in Germany and later at Kunsan Air Base in Korea. So that's my flying background. Of course, I had some other, interesting tours in the Air Force on the staff and various things, but these are the tours that I think your viewers are most interested in.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, Karl, so guys, get your questions coming in for Karl. But yeah, what have you been up to since? Because you've had a big move since the last time we chatted,
Yes.
didn't we?
Well, yeah, for people that saw, obviously I'm not in my office back in Orlando. I'm still in Florida, but I'm close to Eglin Air Force Base. I started a job about 6 weeks ago here at Eglin Air Force Base. So I have a small studio here in the local area, and this is where I'm speaking from today. So unfortunately, you don't see my aircraft model collection in the background, but okay, that'll have to do.
Well,
But
Karl,
yeah, so I started working again after being off for a while, and so it's pretty exciting. It is related to aviation. It's Eglin Air Force Base is where they do a lot of the munitions and systems tests, avionics tests, and of course, I'm not flying here, but I work for a defense contractor on a program that it's actually a software program that computes weapons ballistics and missiles, aircraft trajectories when they deliver weapons and things like that. So specifically, in my case, for the foreign military sales program, so I actually deal with the software versions that we sell to foreign countries. Particularly those that fly the F-15, various F-15 and F-16 variants. But there are other airframes that we also contribute to, like the Mitsubishi F2 in Japan and the F-18, the Canadian F-18s, CF-18, and so on. So it's very interesting.
brilliant stuff. But as you can see, there's some questions coming in, Karl. So I think the
Yeah,
first one
right.
is
So
the Freckle Puny. So I'm going to let you loose, but guys, get your questions coming in for Karl.
okay, so let me see, make sure I get to the top here. Uh, will we see? Okay, I guess it's Sayat Lal. Hopefully, I am. I'm pronouncing this fairly accurately. Will we see any swing wing aircraft in the future? Honestly, I doubt it. I mean, you can never say for sure, but I think the era of swing wing aircraft is over. I think the advance in aerodynamics and computation and in power plants, I think have made it something that probably we won't see. There's the swing wing has its advantages, but there is a cost to pay in weight and complexity, and therefore cost, and also for for stealth airplanes, it's probably, you can still probably make a fairly stealthy, I'm sort of guessing here. I'm not an expert in this, but you could probably still make an aircraft fairly stealthy with swing wing, but it would make it harder to do. So anyway, YouTube 2151, Carl, did you see the F-111 in Australia that landed perfectly with no landing gear? Yes, I have seen that. I've got my own landing gear story to tell on the F-111. It'll take a couple of minutes to do that. And actually, I witnessed a similar landing at Mountain Home Air Force Base when I was a lieutenant flying the A model on the runway there. Although that one had the nose gear extended, but the main landing gear was not, and they couldn't get it down, so they did a belly landing. And the damage was relatively minimal and everything went fine. My own landing gear experience was at Lake and Heath, and I came back, was a night mission. Came back, we put the gear down, going for landing. And the main gear door, which also doubles up as the speed brake on the F-111, stayed fully open and did not retract back to the flush position. And so in that position, it extends farther than the gear does. So that was kind of a problem. But we ended up landing at night on the speed brake. What happened is the speed brake stayed fully extended, and there were sparks flying everywhere. I took the approach end cable. It was no further incident, but the speed brake was basically cut in half. Well, speed brake slash main landing gear door was cut in half, was just ground to a pulp. And, other than it was pretty spectacular, and there were a lot of people like the wing commander or, a lot of high ranking people, of course, were made aware of the incidents, and they came to see the landing, making sure everything was okay, but we were just fine. It was okay. It was one of the few times where I actually took the cable where the F-111 had a hook, like all the most Air Force planes do anyway. Not nearly as strong as the hook, that kind of hook you would have in the Navy, but still strong enough to catch a cable and make you land in a very short amount of distance. All right, let's see. That's enough of that. Okay, so Hurrara. Hey, Carl, what do you think of the Pakistani Air Force? Well, I don't have a strong opinion. I've read some. Obviously, it seems like their pilots are very competent. And of course, they have F-16s, which is of interest to me. And, a few other airplanes. I guess there was the Thunder, the JF-17. Seems like a pretty good aircraft, for the cost. Obviously, I think I would think very highly of how the pilots are trained. But really, it's sort of outside of my area of expertise, but my overall impression that they're very, very good. They have good equipment and very good pilots. So Freckle Puny, given you flew the F-111 and the F-16, how good do you think the F-16 XL would have been? Yes. I mean, honestly, I wish that had been the choice for the Air Force rather than the F-15E. I thought that was a really cool aircraft. Later on, there was also a sort of similar but larger aircraft called the FB-22 that was proposed. That was a delta wing version of the F-22, which would have been totally awesome, but that never happened, unfortunately. So. But yeah, the F-16 XL, I thought it was a really cool aircraft. Now, don't get me wrong, the F-15E turned out to be a great aircraft. It was chosen because there was less development. It was a derivative of an existing aircraft, the two-seater F-15B and D. So it was much easier for it to be certified and so on. So the F-16 XL would have demanded much more flight testing than the F-15E did. But both aircraft were great. So, again, Satyajit Lal asks, what is your opinion on Soviet swing-wing aircraft such as the MiG-23, MiG-27, or Su-24? Well, for their time, they were pretty good aircraft. I mean, they all had their pros and cons. The MiG-23 And MiG-27 were not very good turning aircraft, obviously better than the F-111 or the Su-24. Su-24, of course, very comparable to the F-111, including the crew configuration side by side seating. Very comparable, a little smaller than the F-111, but not too much. A very similar mission, very similar configuration. So obviously, I can't talk to the systems themselves, the radar and all that seemed to be pretty good. They didn't seem to have as much use of precision-guided weapons as we did in the F-111, well, at least in the F-111F anyway. But probably pretty comparable. MiG-23, MiG-27, we learned a lot, particularly during the Cold War. Those, again, not very good turning, but very, very good acceleration. Probably one of the best accelerating fighters, particularly in the transonic range, very fast. And so, the avionics were inferior to what we had in the West, to comparable aircraft like the F-16 or F-15, but still pretty good. Okay, Corneliu Morgavan, what do you think about the F-16A versus C variant in the dogfight? Well, in a pure dogfight, the F-16A would win, probably against most of the other variants, although that would be very close. I mean, it's not like it's completely obvious. But everybody that I talked to I have never flown the A model, so again, I have to put a caveat. But of course, I did talk to a lot of my fellow pilots in the squadron had flown the F-16A before switching to the C model, so they could make a comparison. Some of the newer C model variants have a much stronger engine, like the Pratt & Whitney, the 129 or the GE. No, so the GE is the 129, Pratt & Whitney is the 229, which has that we both have about 29,000 pounds of thrust. So that's a big advantage compared to an A model. On the other hand, the wing loading is less on the F-16A, so because it's a lighter aircraft. So it would be tough. But overall, the guys that flew both the A and C's tended to think the F-16A in a pure dogfight would be better. But then the C model had a lot of other advantages. So. All right, Timberwolf, was the F-111 something like the Tornado of the U.S.? Well, I would say the other way around. The Tornado was the F-111 for the U.K. and the Germany and in Italy and countries that used it, because obviously F-111 came first. But yeah, in some ways, as a matter of fact, the terrain following radar and the main attack radar were derived from the F-111 system. Now they were more modern, they were updated versions of it, but they were derivative of the F-111 system. One of the differences in the F-111 had a dual redundant terrain following radar system, whereas the Tornado had a single radar for terrain following. So that was something that was a little different, but overall the missions were very similar. Tornado probably to turn somewhat better than the F-111, but the F-111, one of the big differences, the F-111 had way more range, probably twice the range of a Tornado, even with a Tornado using external tanks, and could carry probably twice as much armament. So that's the trade-off. Okay, so Corneliu Morgavan again asks F-16 DACT versus, well, we talked about this in my first Q&A and of course in my original interview on the F-16 on this channel, so I don't want to repeat everything, but obviously the F-16, until the advent of Eurofighter and the Rafale and some of the thrust vectoring variants of the Su-27, the F-16 was just king in DACT, period. That. Now, it doesn't mean that we won every single fight. The pilot makes a big difference. So, you could lose if you didn't use the aircraft properly, if you didn't fly it to its strength. We talked about, like, if you want to get a Mirage 2000 Even though the Mirage 2000 has inferior thrust to weight, if you went single circle with against the Mirage 2000, you could get in trouble very fast. So, again, the tactics that you use and the pilot proficiency would make a big difference. But overall, again, until the Eurofighter, the Rafale, and some of the the thrust vectoring variants of the Su-27, Su-30, F-16 was the king in a dogfight. Again, with the caveat that you do have to fly it properly. I hope that answers the question. See, again, Satyajit Lal asks, what is your opinion on the F-16 shut down by an Indian MiG-21? Well, yeah, supposedly there was one that was shut down by a MiG-21. I don't remember all the details. I read some things about it. I thought for one thing that it was not like 100% sure that's what happened. But if it did, it could happen. I mean, again, my understanding it was kind of an unobserved shot. It wasn't really a dogfight. It was like, MiG-21 happened to be in the right place at the right time, and that definitely can happen. So I don't know, but I really don't know much more about that. So it's possible it could happen. I mean, even though the MiG-21, if you get into a dogfight, MiG-21 would have zero chance against an F-16. But again, in air warfare in general, most of the kills are unobserved kills. So in other words, they were unobserved by the victim. This is true from World War I to World War II to Vietnam to it's the guy, lose sight, lose fight. And if you don't have sight in the first place, you're in big trouble. Even famous aces in World War II, like Eric Hartmann, said that he avoided dogfights at all costs, unless he was absolutely forced into one. What he did, he was sneaking on people and then didn't open fire until he was very close and basically couldn't miss. And that's how he got most of his kills. So he would come out of the sun or come out from a position of advantage. And most of the airplanes that he shot down never even saw him coming. So, that's the way you want to do it. So if a MiG-21 ends up being in that position against an F-16, sure, it can happen. All right, so John Mentor, did you enjoy your time flying the F-111 at RAF Lakenheath? Which squadron did you fly? Yeah, so when you first show up at Lakenheath, even though you come from I came from the F-111A model, you do go through a short transition period. And at the time, it was with the 495th Fighter Squadron, which, by the way, has been reactivated recently in anticipation of them flying the F-35 at Lakenheath. So that's coming, I think, sometime next year. The first F-35s are going to show up at Lakenheath, and I think the first squadron is the 495th. I don't think they've announced the second squadron, what its designation is going to be, but there will be two squadrons of F-35 at Lakenheath. In addition to the existing squadron. So I thought they might be replacing the F-15E squadrons there, but no, apparently it's in addition to the existing squadrons at Lakenheath. So, but anyway, I flew with the 495th for about just 3 months or something like that, just a transition. And then my permanent squadron that I was part of was the 492nd Fighter Squadron, the Bowlers, which still exists as an F-15E squadron right now at Lakenheath. So that's who I flew with at Lakenheath. And yes, I enjoyed it very, very much. 3 years at Lakenheath. I consider it one of the high times of my entire career and life, actually. It was fantastic. I loved being in the UK. Once I got used to driving on the left side of the road or the wrong side of the road, whatever, then I was fine, and even had a right-hand drive car when I was there. Yeah, I absolutely loved it. This is some of the fondest memories in my entire life, period, of any place. So, yes. Let's see, where are we at here? Which aircraft do you think is the definitive rival of the F-111? That's kind of an interesting question. Well, obviously the Su-24 Fencer would be At the time, I mean, it was kind of the equivalent. Um, of course, now it's being replaced by the F-15E. So the F-15E is far superior to the F-111 in certain ways, for sure, for the air-to-air capability. I mean, it's not even close. The F-15E is far superior, but the F-111 still has had more range, even with the conformal fuel tanks. Um, and even though the F, I would say the weapons carrying capability was about the same, um, but the avionics in the F-15E are way beyond what we had in the F-111, even with the paved tack system, and certainly the air-to-air capability is not even in the same ballpark. I mean, F-111 air-to-air was almost nothing, very small. The radar was not very good in air-to-air. It had air-to-air capability, but it was very limited, and defensive capabilities were also very limited. So I don't know. I'm not sure if somebody in the comment thinks of some other airframe. I received now the Su-34, and the Russians have the Su-34, which is replacing the Su-24, and that's the side-by-side seating version of the Su-27, and that seems to be like a pretty capable aircraft, very good. It's very, I think it's really cool looking, but so it's a very interesting aircraft that would be in the same category. It's not swing wing, but same sort of mission. So or I guess. Eject anytime? No, I've never ejected either in the F-111 or the F-16. Of course, I know people who have and survived. So that's unfortunately, I know somebody. I knew somebody in the F-16 ejected, but things didn't turn out right, and that was extremely sad. So that was after a mid-air collision. Yeah, when I was flying at Hahn Air Base, the only two pilots we lost, while I was there, so this is the late 80s and early 90s, were both subsequent to mid-air collisions. So in both cases, one guy made it out and the other didn't. So is very sad. But when you're a fighter pilot, I pretty much guarantee there's very few people that are being a fighter pilot for a while that don't know that kind of experience in their life. So that's, being a fighter pilot is inherently dangerous. It's less dangerous now than it used to be in the 50s and 60s. It was extremely dangerous. Now, safety measures and training and the aircraft are more reliable. The ejection seats are way better. So it's not quite as dangerous, but it is dangerous, period. But no, I don't have any personal experience ejecting. So let's see, Bill. I guess it's, it must have been the question must have been cut off, so maybe you can re-ask because it says, were there F-111? I don't know. I don't know what that's about. Okay, Frecon Puny. How big a jump was the capability from the F-111A to the F-111F? Yeah, it was a very big jump. Well, for one thing, we talked about the thrust was 40% more, so you had way more thrust. Didn't translate in that much of a higher top speed at the very end. And this has to do with thrust curves and drag at high speed. But at lower speed or transonic speed, the F-111F was way more powerful. But the biggest difference, maybe, besides the thrust, was the paved tack. So initially, the F-111F didn't have precision guided weapon capability, but by the time I was flying it in the mid-80s, we had the paved tack, infrared, and laser designator pod. So you could designate and guide your own laser guided weapons on a target with very high precision, day or night. And that was a huge jump in capability that the F-111A did not have. Now, in the A model, we occasionally dropped laser guided bombs, but you always needed somebody else to designate the target for you with a laser. Either another aircraft, like when I was at Mountain Home. No, I didn't do it myself. I didn't get to participate in one of those exercises, but I remember some guys going out with laser-guided bombs and having Navy A6s, A6E intruder, equipped with the tram system that would designate the target for them. And I've also heard of cases where there was a ground forward air controller designated a target on the ground for the F-111A, but the F-111A did not have the capability to self-designate, unlike the F-111F. Now, the only other variant of the F-111 that had the capability to self-designate with PIVTAC is the F-111C, which the Australians flew. So the F-111C was kind of a hybrid version. You know, it's had some characteristics of the A, or actually the E model, so, but it had the big wing like the FB-111, the longer wing, and it eventually got the same PAVTAC system that the F-111F had. So that's something the Australians had on their C models as well. So they had that capability, but they did not have the extra thrust of the F-111F. Okay, so Satyajit Lal, again, apologies for mispronunciations, but after flying F-16B/D and F-111, do you prefer tandem seating or one behind another? Well, that's the same. Tandem is one behind another, but I assume you mean side-by-side seating versus tandem seating, or one behind another. And I would say, as a pilot, for sure, I like the tandem seating way better. There were some advantages to side-by-side as far as crew coordination, but I would say the disadvantages as visibility from the cockpit did not. I mean, I would much rather have like the arrangement like an F-15E, where the Wizzo is in the back seat, compared to the F-111. There were other aircraft that have side-by-side. The A6E intruder, or the A6 intruder in general, had the same side-by-side seating, but in the A6E, interestingly enough, it had a little bit more of a bubble canopy compared to the F-111. And the other thing that Navy did, the Wizzo, or they didn't call him a Wizzo, they call him a NFO, Naval Flight Officer. His seat was slightly behind and below, or lower compared to the pilot seat. Not a lot, but slightly, just to make it easier for the pilot to be able to see on the right side of the aircraft. On the F-111, for the pilot who was sitting on the left seat, to see to the right, you could see to about 90 degrees, but after that, you basically had to ask the Wizzo. And a good Wizzo would do this automatically. They would check, their side of the aircraft for potential threats, but it was not optimal from an outside visibility point of view. I hope that answers the question. So let's see. Ian Saxon says, great. Do you have any cherished memorabilia or man cave items from your flying days? Well, I have a lot, but today I happen not to be in I don't have a man cave, but I have an office. And if you saw my original interviews on this channel, you can see a little bit of it. It's only a small portion of memorabilia, but I even have, that didn't show in the videos, but I have my flying helmet that's displayed in my office. The one that I flew, CRU-55/P, and I have tons of memorabilia, but unfortunately today I can't show any of it because I'm not in my real home. But I have plaques, I have pictures, I have I have all my decorations from being in the military, so all my medals and things like that are displayed. But maybe at a future date we can show you all that stuff. We can do a tour of my huge aircraft model collection and my memorabilia at that time, if Mike is willing to do that. That might be an interesting thing that people might like. So, Siggy Driver asks, did you have any scares in the with the EPU hydrazine system in the F-16? I was told it's deadly. That's the reputation it has. So that's a good question, actually. So the emergency power unit in the F-16 uses this substance called hydrazine It's also used like in a space shuttle, or was in fact the space shuttle was, and I think in some other space systems. But yeah, it's a very toxic material. But when you say deadly, no, I mean it could be deadly if you were exposed to it for a really prolonged, if you're in a very confined space and you were exposed to it for a prolonged amount of time, yeah, you could die from it. But it was not nearly as toxic as people made it to be. Now, yeah, if the EPU was on the ground, you don't want to stick around for too long. Obviously, it could hurt your lungs, but it wasn't like, oh, you get one sniff and you're dead. No, not even close. But it was a concern, and there are warnings in the Dash One, the aircraft manual, talking about that, and that you don't want to stick around, and then if your EPU had been activated, basically upon landing, you would be sequestered, on a part of the airbase that was away, and then when the fire department and the emergency units would react, they would have the, breathing apparatus to, and of course in a cockpit you had the option of getting 100% oxygen, so you basically didn't have to breathe that stuff. But again, the toxicity of hydrazine is very often grossly exaggerated. Okay, so. Well, let's see. Where are we here? Were there F-111 squadrons in Germany? No, there were not. No, occasionally we'd land in Germany. So did you expect to be able to return to the UK on a real mission? Well, it depends what kind of mission. I mean, I mentioned earlier in some of the early interviews that the F-111 had a nuclear mission while we were at RAF Lakenheath during the Cold War. So I pulled alert, nuclear alert, and then some of these missions you were not expected to come back all the way back to the UK. I'm not going to go into details. It's exactly where, but there were contingencies for returning at other NATO air bases, at other places, depending on how far your target was. So. But on conventional missions, yeah, you always plan to come back to the UK. The F-111 had a very long range, so you could reach a long way even from the UK airfields. Now, one thing is we did practice, so maybe on some missions you might have been tasked, or maybe, let's say you go on a mission and you plan to come back to the UK, but because you are engaged and you use more afterburner than necessary, now you're short on fuel. So we did practice landing in Germany on occasion, and there were a series of exercises called ample train and ample gain that we participated in. And so ample train was practicing refueling the aircraft at a base other than your home base. So you would land like at Sembach Air Base in Germany, and the ground crews there would practice refueling your F-111 while you waited, and then took off again, and then flew back home. And then the ample gain was a little bit more elaborate, because that was not only ground refueling, but they would also practice loading weapons on you, so you could fly another mission from that airfield. So again, ample train, ample gain. We did practice those things on a fairly irregular basis. I mean, I did it several times, both in the F-111 and the F-16, by the way. Even though I'm flying F-16s in Germany. So occasionally we practice, landing at somewhere else and be refueled and or rearmed at a different base. So yes, but yeah, in general, for conventional missions, you always plan to come back to the UK. Different for nuclear missions. Timberwolf asks, UAP, yeah, so UFOs, yeah. What does the UAP stand for? Well, anyway, it's the UFO, unidentified flying objects, being investigated. Yeah, that's the question somebody asked last time, I think. No, I never personally was witness to something that I could have, said, hey, I really don't understand what that is. So yeah, I'm very familiar with the reports that people have made of seeing things they just can't explain, that behave in very bizarre ways that, you could say it's not just another aircraft or a weather, quote unquote, weather balloon or or a natural phenomenon. So, but I don't know what to think about it. Yeah, it's very interesting, but nobody knows. And again, there were some declassified documents recently by Congress, but they still didn't come out, very clear as to exactly what possible explanations would be for some of these phenomena. So, at least it seems like they're taking it more seriously now that you're not automatically dismissed as being out of your mind if you report something like this. So I think it's being taken more seriously than it used to be in the past. At least that's the impression I get. But what I don't know of any conclusive evidence that these things are extraterrestrial or whatever, that I know of. So that's the best I can answer. I personally never saw something like that. So Callum McFarlane asked, what were your favorite places to fly in Scotland? Well, obviously I did the Loch Ness run many, many, many times. But as far as landing in Scotland, the only two bases I landed was Loukers and Lossiemouth. So I actually have landed at both of these places for various reasons. Not too often, a couple of times at each place. It was interesting because one time I landed at Lossiemouth, and actually, well, actually, no, that's not true. I was sent to Lossiemouth and to pick up an aircraft that had diverted there because I was the chief of functional check flight. So the aircraft had been fixed at Lossiemouth by a cruise that we sent there, and then I had to do a test on it with my Wizzo. So we spent the night there, and I met up with a RAF, navigator, Graham Seward, who was a Buccaneer navigator, but had been on an exchange tour in the F-111 when I was at Mountain Home there. When I was at Mountain Home, we had an exchange pilot, Rick Phillips, and an exchange navigator, Graham Seward, that flew with us in the squadron there for about, I don't know, 2 years at least, maybe a little bit more. And I think Rick Phillips then transitioned. He used to be in a Buccaneer pilot, but then transitioned to the Tornado after coming back from the 111 tour. But Graham Seward went back to the Buccaneer initially. I think he did go to the Tornado eventually, but so he was stationed at Lossiemouth, and then so we met up a couple 3 years after we had gone our own ways from flying F-111As at Mountain Home in Idaho, and that was very interesting. So, and then Loukers a couple of times there as well. Oh no, wait a second, I'm forgetting one incident. That's not Scotland. So Binbrook, sorry, that's in the UK, but it's not Scotland. So I did have a land because of an emergency once at Binbrook, but that's not in Scotland. So that's outside of the scope. I hope that answers the question. I didn't spend like a lot of time there, but both places look pretty awesome. And but we flew all over Scotland. I mean, we just went all the way in the Highlands, restricted area, even including at night doing terrain following radar missions up there. Yeah, we did all kind. We did most of our flying because it was not as densely populated as the South, or England or Wales. We flew in Wales quite a bit too. But I would say Scotland by far was where our favorite training areas were. So. Asked, what do you think of the F-22? Oh, I wish I could fly it. I wish I could have flown it. The F-22 is just an incredible aircraft. Now you can argue, because it was very expensive, but part of it was very expensive is because they didn't build enough of them. They should never have stopped the production. I mean, not at the 187. I think the total airframes built was 193 or 194, but that included the prototype. So the production version, I think, was 187, and that just wasn't nearly enough. We should have built a lot more. The only it's just an incredible aircraft. I've seen it in person. In fact, I've seen. I think Mike is going to interview. Is it Major Gunderson in a short while here? But I've seen his demo in person twice in Florida. Very impressive. But as some F-22 pilots have said before, even though the maneuverability of the F-22 is absolutely incredible in a close fight, that is the least impressive thing about the aircraft. So that should tell you something. So yeah, the only thing that you could criticize really is its range is not the best. I mean, you have to figure out it has about the same amount of gas internally as an F-35, but it has twice the engines. So it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out the F-35 is going to have way more range than an F-22. So, but again, it depends what you compare it to, you know. But and it can carry external fuel tanks, but then of course that degrades the stealth a lot. So, but that would be the one thing where it comes a little short. But of course, you know, that's why the Air Force uses air refueling a lot. So I hope that answers the question. I think the F-22, yeah, that's part of the aircraft I would have wished I could have flown, but other than the F-14. Cornelio Morgavan, so just thank you. Well, you're welcome. It's my pleasure already to answer these questions. It's fantastic that people are interested in this. I wish I were still flying. I wouldn't change anything in my career. I'm very privileged to have done this. So if I can encourage people, younger people to get into that career field, flying fighters or doing something like this, then it's great. And that's why I think very highly of Mike's channel as well. Aircrew Interview channel is just fantastic. All right, so Freckle Puny asks, on a more somber note, how survivable was the F-111 against Warpack defenses in the 1980s? Yeah, that's a truly excellent question. Now, yeah, it was actually quite survivable in the 80s. Because now remember, that's why we flew at low level all the time back then. And when I say at low level, I'm talking like really low level. Now at night you were limited to 200 feet because that's how low the terrain following radar could go. But unless the terrain was completely flat, 200 feet was more than enough to evade just about any radar guided SAMs. And at night you basically negate not 100%, but 99%. All the light AAA, the shoulder fired SAMs, infrared SAMs, just because they can't see you coming. They have no warning. By the time they hear you overhead, it's too late. Now, it's not completely impossible. I mean, in Vietnam, we did lose a couple of F-111. Although, the circumstances for the F-111s that were lost in Vietnam or in many cases were unknown. So it could have been just aircraft malfunction. But we did lose a couple due to AAA. So I know that for a fact. So it's not impossible if you have a very high concentration. But nevertheless, we believe that we were quite survivable as long as you went at night or bad weather and you were at low altitude. Then we were quite survivable. Now you have to remember back then, that was before the era of the was so-called double-digit SAMs like SA-10s and subsequent, or PMU 300, or the newer Soviet or now Russian SAMs, which are quite deadly. Although they do have their limitations at low altitude as well. Even those most advanced systems still can't see through a mountain. So if you have any kind of relief where you can hide behind, it's going to be very tough for these guys to track you if you're flying low level. So yeah, you would have taken losses. And you saw, if you want an example, in the Desert Storm, we didn't lose a single F-111, even though the air defenses there were, well, okay, I'm not going to say they were quite completely equivalent to what we would have seen in the Warsaw Pact, Central Europe scenario. No, they were not, but the types of systems were similar, and in some areas that the F-111s were engaged in, the density of the defenses were very high. Plus, yeah, you have to remember, they didn't always operate alone. There were wild weasels there. There's jammer aircraft. Um, in fact, we had the F-111 at the time that could do escort missions with us and jam the enemy radars. So when you put it all together, I think we would have been quite survivable. Now, having said that, yeah, we would have taken losses. There's no doubt about it. Although the other example is the loss of the one F-111 in El Dorado Canyon. So presumably, I think the preponderance of evidence is that they were shut down, or at least suffered damage due to a surface-to-air missile. I think it's just the best we can figure out. As far as I know, there was never any conclusive finding as to how they went down. But Fernando Ribas and Paul Lawrence were the two aircrew that were lost, and I knew both of them personally. So very sad story, but possibly they were shot down. But again, their approach. It goes to show you, how tactics and a lot of different factors will come into that equation. Is they were approaching over water, so no terrain masking, whatever, and they were like the number 8 in an 8-ship string. So by the time they got in there, the defensors were well warned, and you can go back 20/20 hindsight, but probably wasn't the best tactics to use. But okay, I wasn't there, so I mean I was at Lakenheath when it happened, but I did not go on the raid. So again, 20/20 hindsight, but it was a very sad event in my career for sure. Let's see. Troy Llewellyn asked, "What is your opinion with use of drone aircraft to supplement fifth-gen aircraft?" Yeah, I think particularly as a supplement as opposed to a replacement for fifth-gen aircraft, because they would be two different things. Now, drones do a lot of stuff already, but yeah, a stealthy drone that would be something called the loyal wingman that would follow the fifth-gen aircraft around. And the main reason I say it would be great is because one of the limitations on the F-22 and F-35 is how many weapons they can carry internally, particularly air-to-air weapons, but air-to-ground as well. So to maintain stealth, they have internal weapons carriage, but of course that limits the number of weapons they can carry. And so if you had a drone there with its own internal carriage of weapons, that would provide an extra, 8, 10 missiles or extra air-to-ground ordnance, that would be controlled by the lead aircraft. That would be fantastic. And I know they're working on it. So, because I know that is a limitation on stealth aircraft, is how many weapons you can carry internally. So it's one of the compromises that you have to live with. And if you had a loyal wingman kind of drone, that would be very, very useful. Well, thanks, Anthony. Anthony Furnival. Thank you for the comments. I don't know if I'm a legend in my own mind, maybe, but anyway, let's see. But Anthony also asks now, did you ever fly air show displays? And if so, how was it? No, unfortunately, I thought it would have been great to do that. Yeah, I did a couple of flybys in the F-111, but that's not a display. It's just like flybys at special events. Like I remember doing flyby at a cemetery close to in the Cambridge area in the UK for, I think it was a 11 November commemoration, or I can't remember the exact thing, but it was, it was a ceremony there, and we did a flyby. But I mean, all I do is just fly low level at low altitude. The biggest challenge was to be exactly on time on those things. But no, I unfortunately was never a display pilot. But I think that would have been really one of the coolest things to do. But no, I don't have any stories to tell you about this. Yeah, but it was something I would have liked to do, so I answered that part. So Timberwolf asks, can you speak some on a particularly combat or red flag type operation where things got hairy, got interesting tactically? Okay, well, yeah, I already mentioned the one red flag thing. No, I never, I never flew in combat, yeah, either in the F-111 or F-16. My combat experience, as mentioned in previous interviews, was on the ground. I was in Desert Storm, but I was a forward air controller with an Army unit, so I controlled the aircraft in combat, but I did not fly in combat. So I guess you could say unfortunately or fortunately, because I mean, obviously it's not something. I mean, that's something you prepare for and you're ready for it, both mentally and physically, and you're training to that end. But obviously, you would prefer to deter combat as opposed to having to be forced to actually fight the enemy. But if we have to, we're ready. But no, it didn't. But as far as I had several incidents where things got kind of hairy. Um, you know, Particularly when you're flying at night in the F-111 at 200 feet, you really have to be super careful. And it's not. I don't know. Maybe hairy is not the right word, but you do. You do pay close attention to what's going on, and particularly when you're being jumped by other aircraft, even at night. Um, so, um, but actually, the closest thing to you know being what we call a mort, or being a fatal accident in the F-111 was not during an exercise. It wasn't during a strange mission. I was on a mission with my Wizzo, one of my best friends actually, Chris Singalowicz. Um, so we were just single ship, and we were flying on a route that we were not familiar with in Oregon. So that's when I was stationed at Mountain Home Air Force Base, flying the F-111A, and this was sometime after we were restricted from using the terrain following radar because there had been a fatal accident, and I can't remember if it was at Cannon. I can't remember where, but there was an accident that involved malfunction of the terrain following radar. So for a while, until they figured out exactly what happened, we were all prohibited from using the TFR for a while. Until the accident investigation board figure out what happened. So here I am, and I'm flying with my friend and Wizzo Chris, and we are single ship in Oregon on a route that I had never flown before, but the weather is not very good, so we're flying in the clouds. But because the terrain following radar it's working, but we're not supposed to use it, so we're flying what's called MEA, minimum en route altitude, and that's an altitude that we compute based on the terrain elevations and things like this that on both sides of the route. So to make sure that if you're flying at altitude, you're safe you're above the closest obstacle within like a 5 mile radius. So we're flying in the clouds at MEA, minimum en route altitude, on that route. But even though we were not using the terrain following radar in the sense that I'm not flying on TFR, I had it turned on. So I was able to, on what's called the E-scope, the elevation scope, I was able to see the terrain in front of me. And everything was going okay, but after a while, I'm looking at my E-scope and I say, "Hey, Chris, this does not look right. The terrain looks like it's going to cross the way." There was a line that indicated if the terrain return crossed that line, that means you were below the altitude that you needed to be safe. I say, "Hey, something doesn't look right. This is not good. I'm going up." And he said, "No, no, no, no. Everything is fine. We're at MEA." I said, "No, Chris, I'm going up." And so I pulled up until the terrain was below the line. And he said, "Yeah, you're right," because in his attack radar, he was able to see that it was getting darker and darker in his attack radar, which means that we're below the mountain in front of us. And so the radar return is not seeing what's behind the mountain. And then he said, "Oh, okay, you're right. Let's go up." And sure enough, we were below and this was aircrew error. We had miscalculated the MEA for that leg on the route by 1,000 feet. So this could have been really bad because if I had not had, well, he probably would have caught it in his attack radar anyway. If he's paying attention. But let's say neither of us was looking into our radar and we were just trusting our calculations, we would have impacted that mountain for sure. So this was after the fact. It was like, okay, this, you always, things go in your mind and you say, well, this could have been it, But again, I was always the kind to like, to have a plan B, and my plan B here. So even though we're not flying TFR, I had the TFR turned down, and again, that saved us. So that's probably the hairiest thing I ever did flying, as far as me personally. And I had a couple of close calls in the F-16 as far as getting really close to other aircraft because of losing sight, and so pretty close to a midair. But when you say close to a midair, it depends what you mean by close. And again, I've known midairs to happen. So, but that wasn't as close as this. So.
Hi,
So
Carl.
I see Mike's friendly face here. I think we're getting close to time, I guess.
Well, I was going to ask her, can we be cheeky and ask you to go on to 8:30, or is that too late for you, Carl?
No, I'm fine.
All right, great, guys. So we got Carl on to 8:30 UK time. So get your questions in. This has been a great Q&A. So, Carl, I'm going to let you carry on.
Yeah, see, I'm going to catch up to where I am because I was rambling quite a long time here about that incident. But that was, again, if you want to talk about one of my scary experiences, which turned out okay in the end, but that was it. Was my F-111 incident on that route, flying in the weather, in the clouds. So let's see. MGM asks, any contact with the North Korean Air Force during your Korean deployment? No. Well, I mean, I suppose, not visually, let's put it that way. I mean, on the radar, sometimes you could pick up stuff on the other side. When I was flying at Kunsan, we very often flew in what's called a P518. That's it's basically an area. So at the 30th parallel, the border between North and South Korea, there is a buffer zone which you're never supposed to enter. And by the way, that was the case in the old Cold War days between, East Germany and West Germany, or let's say West Germany and the Czech Republic, or Czechoslovakia at the time, actually, it was Czechoslovakia, or Hungary. So there was a buffer zone, and if the radar controllers would see you enter that buffer zone, they would call you immediately because that could have been potentially very dangerous to make an unintentional incursion into North Korean airspace. But we flew so just south of that buffer zone, and I can't remember exactly how wide the buffer zone was, but it wasn't like huge. Might have been 5 miles. It wasn't a huge zone. So when you're traveling 8 miles a minute, 5 miles is not a whole lot. So, but anyway, so south of that there was an area called P518, and we used to fly missions in there all the time, particularly close air support missions. And we would practice with forward air controllers on the ground, and occasionally with airborne forward air controllers. Most of the time, these were A-10s flying, or they were sometimes designated O-A-10s, but really they were just A-10s, that flying in the airborne FAC role. And those were flying out of Osan Air Base, just close to Seoul. And so we would be controlled by either a ground FAC or an airborne FAC. And one time I actually got controlled by a Navy airborne FAC flying in an F-14. So that was kind of interesting. So it was an F-14 airborne FAC controlling me and my flight flying close air support in P518. That was very interesting. And I could see the F-14 up there or above us, and he would just, give us targets on the ground and get our eyes on target. So that was, but so occasionally when you're flying P518, and if you want if you are air-to-air radar, you could see contacts on the other side. But what exactly they were and stuff like that, I can't get into. But no, I never visually saw like like a North Korean MiG or anything like that. So you know, so that's a very limited, I guess, in that sense. But we were flying pretty close to North Korea. That's for sure. So let's see. Troy Llewellyn asks, so are you more of a fan of the Patrouille de France demo team or the Thunderbirds? Oh, I like both. In fact, I interacted with Patrouille de France way back when I was flying F-111s at Lakenheath. I participated in an air show in France, in Nantes, on the west coast, Atlantic coast, or close, on the Loire Valley. So they were inaugurating it was an air show where they had I think it was the inauguration of a new airport there, or a new portion of the airport. So they invited a bunch of aircraft. Now, we were only a static display, so we did not do a demo. Although my leader did do a flyby, a couple of limited demo, I guess you could call it, of the F-111 at that air show, but I stayed on the ground. So we were a static display for the people to ask questions. So we were standing by the aircraft and during static display and answered a bunch of questions for the people visiting. And the Patriot de France was at that air show, and they did a demo. So after the air show, we got to meet the people, the pilots from Patrouille de France, and because I speak French fluently, obviously, that's my first language. So it was of course they all speak English, but it was very easy for me to interact. It was very interesting. It was so I did talk to these guys, but so yeah, I think they're great. But as far as saying who's the best. Okay, that's hard for me to say, but I'd say the Blue Angels probably are the best. And my son, he's soon to be 10 years old. My son, he's like a Blue Angels big time fan, and we went to see the Blue Angels first demo back in, was it April or May of this year, in Lakeland, Florida. That was the very first demo, was the Super Hornets so we were there, me and my son. My daughters weren't as interested, so they stayed home, but I took my son to the air show in Lakeland, and we saw the first ever full demo in public of the Super Hornet equipped Blue Angels. And so I would say, yeah, I'm biased for the Thunderbirds because they're Air Force, and they're very, very good. I mean, don't get me wrong, but I've never seen any demo team that flies as close to each other as the Blue Angels do. It's just amazing. So I hope that answers the question. But yeah, I've seen the Red Arrows too. The Red Arrows are fantastic. I mean, Snowbirds. I've seen most of these, and yeah, they do different things, and so, but they're all the top-notch pilots, all of them. I think if I'm 100% honest, I would say that all of them, like the Blue Angels, are going to be the top. But anyway, hope I didn't offend anybody by saying that, but I think a lot of people would agree with me anyway. So. Oh yeah, so people seem to be weighing in on doing a tour of my model collection. So Mike, if you're up to it, of course it has to be on a day when I'm back in Orlando. So we'll have to schedule that. I do go back on a regular basis, every couple of weeks. So if we can arrange that, I'd be more than happy. I'm very proud of my model collection. I have over 750 aircraft displayed. Most under glass, but some in the open, and then also have tanks and military vehicles and memorabilia and things. So if people are really interested, we could arrange for that, either live or do a recording or something. I don't know, whatever. So that's up to Mike. But yeah, I'm up for it. The only thing is, see, now I'm not back home in Orlando all the time, so it's a little bit tougher for the scheduling, but I'm sure we can figure out something. Yeah, I'm very proud of that collection. I have a ton of aircraft from so many different countries and different eras from World War One to the present. So let's see. Anthony Furnival asks, if you had a time machine to go back in time, is there anything you'd have done differently in your career? Well, that's hard to say. I mean, overall, and I was very pleased with what happened, with what I did. I made the right choices at the right time. Never, no regrets. Um, yeah, that's a hard one. I mean, honestly, I would have liked to go to test pilot school and then be an astronaut, but yeah, honestly, that is ultra competitive. Now, I know a couple of my flying buddies, F-111 that ended up doing that. So well, Kevin Kriegel is one of them, ended up being a shuttle commander for four. Well, he flew in on the shuttle four times, I think, as a commander for either once or twice, as a pilot the other two times. But he was flying F-111s at Lake and Heath when I was there. And then, uh, so and there was somebody else, but the name escapes me at the time. I'll think about it later. But yeah, so that would have been something. But it's like it's so competitive that it's not like a decision. It's just something I wish I could have done. But it's not so much based on a decision of mine. It's not you can just I'll just decide to go to test pilot school. You had no. I had the engineering degree to do that. So because that was one of the requirements is to have some kind of scientific background, education. So my degree was in engineering physics. So yeah, I fulfilled that part. But you have to have so many hours, and you have to be the top. I wasn't bad, but obviously, flying fighters, and I'm not gonna let anybody do that. Um, and I was an instructor and flight lead. But it takes more than that. You got to be in the top like 1%. Maybe even higher than that. For certainly for astronauts, it's higher than top 1%. Top 1,000, so something like that. Anyway, but no, other than that, that's I really enjoyed my career. No regrets. So. Blajaz Ceramac asks, which one had a higher max speed on the deck, F-111F or F-16C? I've heard interview with F-111F pilot who said going cold and run was the best. Well, yeah, tactic to survive. Absolutely, that's a fact. I mean, in F-111, probably was faster than anything else on the deck. Now, some people argue the MiG-23, if it was a clean, it was pretty close. And I'll say Tornado is also very fast on the deck. But between the F-16C and the F-111F, the F-111 is going to be faster. And the F-16C was pretty fast at low altitude. I've been supersonic on the deck in Turkey. Well, you could only do it over water, not over land, but I've done it. And I was going 1.1 plus, and I was still accelerating, so I didn't push it too hard because the problem is, even though it was over water, there were a bunch of fishing boats out there, and I started feeling sorry for the guys with the supersonic boom But yeah, I've done it. But yeah, the F-111F for sure would have been faster, although the F-16C was no slouch on the deck. The F-16C was at a disadvantage the higher you went, and because the main reason is it has a fixed air intake as opposed to variable ramp air intake, whereas the F-111 had variable ramp intakes, which made the engines more efficient in a broader range of the flight envelope. So the F-16 had a very high thrust to weight ratio, though, so that's kind of makes up for it, to some extent. But if you have variable ramp intakes, like an F-15, an F-15A or C, at the higher you want, like at 40,000 feet, at lower altitude, the F-16C would be a better dogfighter than the F-15, although again, the pilot would make most of the difference. But overall, I would say the F-16 would be a better dogfighter. But if you want above 30,000 feet, that's a different story because the F-15C, then its thrust to weight ratio was able to be maintained better than the F-16 because it had variable ramp inlets, and we had a fixed ramp, so fixed inlet. So again, you can have broad generalities, but there are some subtleties in there. So, but okay, I rambled on long enough about that one. Joe and the 777 asks, were the Block 25s that you flew AIM-7 Sparrow capable? No, they were not. There were very few F-16s that ever were AIM-7 capable. I can think of the ones, and I think they were Block 15s, or maybe Block 20s that were sold to Taiwan, so Republic of China. Those were capable. And then in the US, the so-called F-16 ADF, Air Defense Fighter, that were only used by the Air National Guard. They were never active duty units that used it, but those were AIM-7 capable. These were modified A models. But the Block 25, no, they were never AIM-7 capable at any point. So when I was flying at Han and the Block 25, at the very end of my tour, we got the software for the AIM-120 in the aircraft. So the computers were updated. And so in theory, we were capable of shooting it. So this is like the late 89, early 1990, pretty more like early 1990. We started getting the software update, but we didn't have the missiles on base yet. So, well, by the time I flew at Kunsan in the 90s, mid 90s, then of course we were fully integrated. We had AIM-120s. We flew Air Defense Alert at Kunsan with aircraft and with a two-ship loaded with 4 AIM-120s and 2 AIM-9s. So this was a standard air-to-air loadout. So 4 AIM-120s, 2 AIM-9 Mikes at the time. That was before the AIM-9X era. Yeah, then we became fully capable with the AIM-120, which did change, quite a bit of tactics. But it was interesting flying against, like when I was flying at Han, flying against F-15Cs from Bitburg. So they were AIM-7 capable, AIM-7Fs and M, Mike. So we had to use notching tactics to try to get away from that. And then once we closed in, typically we had the advantage. And again, it wasn't, I mentioned this earlier, then it wasn't so much because of the aircraft maneuverability, although that was a factor, or the pilot capability, because on that they had an advantage because they were 100% air-to-air, whereas we only flew like 30, or if we were lucky, 40% air-to-air missions, and the other 60 to 70% were air-to-ground. So from proficiency point of view, F-15 guys were better. However, we were a lot smaller. So they would lose sight of us all the time, whereas for us, it was much easier to keep track visually of an F-15. And that makes a huge difference, enormous difference in a dogfight, particularly against, multi-bogey. If you're 1v1, it's still an advantage, but not as much. But if you're like 4v4, it's a huge advantage. And I can't tell you, I cannot overemphasize how the aircraft size makes as a difference in a multi-bogey close-in environment. It's an enormous advantage. All right, so that's enough on this. But yeah, no AIM-7. Never flew an aircraft that was AIM-7 capable in my career. Andrew Arias Lloyd asked, good morning. Did you have any experience flying before you commissioned? Well, the limited extent that when I was a cadet, so this before I was commissioned, I was a second lieutenant. So I was a cadet in the Reserve Officer Training Corps at the University of California, Berkeley. And so during your time as a cadet in your senior year, your last year as a cadet, the Air Force did pay for 25 hours of instruction at a civilian, at a local civilian club airfield with a civilian instructor. Although my civilian instructor had flown like F-105s in Vietnam, so he was a former fighter pilot, but after he retired, he became a civilian instructor, and we were flying the Cessna 152, Cessna 150s and 152. And so as I said, that was my experience. I had never flown before. I did. So that was like a pre-selection, so to make sure that they didn't send somebody to pilot training and waste their time if they couldn't even fly a Cessna 150. If they couldn't handle that, then much less would they be able to handle a T-37 or a T-38 later. So that was an initial. Not too many people fail at that point. I mean, but I've heard of cases where it does happen for various reasons. No, but it's unusual. But yeah, that was the limit of my experience. Now well, as a cadet, we also got a couple of rides, so as a passenger in a T-37. So I had flown in a T-37 in the right seat with an instructor in the left seat, but that was just a familiarization flight. I got two of these flights. I was kind of mad because I didn't get a T-38 flight. I really wanted to fly in a T-38, but didn't get to that. But still, it was already fun flying a T-37 before I even went to pilot training. At least you get an idea what to expect. But that was it. I did not have a private pilot license or anything like this. Later on, I did. I got that, but not at the time. Let's see. But some people. That's interesting. That brings me to an interesting point. There were guys when I went to pilot training that had a very extensive experience as civilian pilots flying, propeller airplanes like Cessna 172s and all that. And it was very interesting observation. These guys tended to do excellent in the T-37, but then when they went to the T-38, they tended to do not as good on average. I mean, there's always exceptions either way. But on average, they tended to not do as well as the rest of it that did not have previous experience. Most people said it's because they were used to flying slower airplanes, and when they went to the T-38, which flew, way faster, somehow their brains were cued to flying slower, and they had a hard time adapting to the faster speeds. And it was strange, So they were way better than average in the T-37 phase. But that didn't apply to the T-38 phase, which was very interesting. So anyway, let's see. Where am I now? Andrew again says, I've met Major Cabo Gunderson when he came to speak at the detachment early in the pandemic. Oh, yeah, okay. Well, I've never met him in person, but I've seen his demo twice in person. In Florida, one time at the Sanford Air Show just north of Orlando, and then at Lakeland, the same air show I mentioned where we saw the Blue Angels. There was also, he was there doing the F-22 demo, which is just absolutely amazing. It's just incredible. I've also seen the F-35 demo, which is also fantastic. It doesn't have the thrust vectoring, so there's some maneuvers it can't do, but it's still just amazing what it can do as well. So let's see. Anthony Furnival says, purely on looks rather than technical ability, what is your favorite looking airplane? Can be anywhere in the world. Oh, that's a hard one. There could be so many answers to that. So I've made no secret of the fact that I was a super fan of the Tomcat. So that has to be part of my answer. I think it's just the coolest airplane ever looking. But if you don't go on pure beauty, but that's not based on pure beauty. It has, I don't know, it just has this cool look. It's just different. And I don't know. Obviously, the first thing that came to mind to me was a Spitfire. I think it's a fantastically beautiful aircraft. Certainly compared to the aircraft of its era, like the Me-109 is a legend, but it doesn't look nearly as good as a Spitfire. I mean, it's not close. I think the Spitfire particularly the early Spitfires. The later the Griffin-powered Spitfires were still good looking, but I don't consider them as good looking as the Merlin-powered Spitfires. But to me, that remains one of the most beautiful aircraft ever. It's funny because the British, no offense, Mike, but the British have some of the most beautiful aircraft design and some of the ugliest aircraft designs ever, which is kind of strange. It's funny because from the same country you get beautiful designs and then you get some really, really ugly ones too. So I don't know. It's either one or the other extreme. But I don't know what anybody else thinks about that opinion. But anyway, that's my opinion. But I would say that, and I do think the F-16 is a very good-looking aircraft, and so I do think it's good-looking. I don't know that this the first airplane that came to mind besides the Tomcat was a Spitfire, so I'll leave it at that. So let's see, where am I? Wish I was in person, but better. Okay, yeah, as far as. Yeah. So Freckle Puny says, asked how much of a maintenance hog was the F-111? Yeah, good question, and I'm pretty sure you know the answer to that one. Yeah, it was a maintenance hog, and that's one of the reasons the Air Force, got rid of it because the capability was still, with some modernization they could have modernized, and they did modernize the avionics on some of them. There was a thing called the AMP or AMP modification, avionics modernization program, which put some new digital displays on computers and things like that, new INS, much more accurate than before. A lot of the E models were modified. Some of the FB111s were modified and became the F111G. So the F111G is nothing more than an FB111 that was that SAC or that the strategic Air Force handed over to tactical Air Force, and they were redesignated G models, but they also had some new avionics. So, but yeah, it was a maintenance hog. It definitely was, a child of the 1960s as far as design, and back then, ease of maintenance was not a high consideration. This goes with not just the F-111, although the F-111, but even the F-14 was, not known as a maintenance-friendly aircraft. The F-14 is only, slightly newer than the F-111, and famously was a replacement for the F-111B, the Navy version of the F-111, with the same engines and the same avionics. The AWG-9 was initially mounted on the F-111B, and the Phoenix missile was mounted on the F-111B, which of course was never produced in series. There were only a few prototypes of that, but so yeah, it was not maintenance friendly. But again, it's if you compare it to the aircraft of the same era, like the F-105, the F-104, even the F-4, it was only slightly worse, because of the swing wing and some other things, but it was pretty much, typical for the era. Later on, when they designed the F-16, the F-18, the F-15 was kind of in between, but for sure the F-18, the F-16 were designed with much more consideration for the ease of maintenance. So that these were like the first generation of aircraft that engineers actually thought about, hey, maybe we should make those panels easier to open, to change like a black box or something like this, ease of access, put the systems where the maintenance crews don't have to climb on ladders and, go all kinds of, like make the engine easier to swap out, things like that. Again, talking about engine swap, one of the worst examples for that was the British Lightning, because, the the engines on top of each other. So, yeah, it looks cool, but from a maintenance point of view, that's kind of a nightmare. So again, designed in the 50s, 60s, people didn't have that as a priority. Having said that, in the F-111, if you had the right number of maintenance crews and the right parts, it was pretty reliable, so it was good. So let's see. Henry Lee asked, why does the afterburner of an F-111 looks more of a fire show instead of a concentrated cone of fire. I don't know if he's referring to the torching thing, which is not the afterburner, normal afterburner. So if you're talking about torching, that's dumping fuel. The fuel dump mast in the F-111 is between the two engines on the back. And so if you dump fuel and light the afterburner at the same time, you will ignite a massive flame on the back, which is about at least twice, if not three times the length of the airplane, something like that. And yeah, that will do that, but that's not the afterburner per se. Now, having said that, particularly on the F model, the afterburner plume is very bright and big, but I think that's pretty what he's talking about. But that's the reasons, because if you dump fuel, the fuel dump mast is right in the exact location, and it tells you, that's what to expect. Now, the Australians do that a lot. We were prohibited from doing it unless it was an emergency. Although I think I talked about this in one of my previous talks, is on a couple of times we did it. Just to somebody couldn't see me and say, okay, watch this, and then after I torched, they could see me just fine. All right, let's see. Do you think? This is Anthony again. Anthony Furnival says, do you think multi-role jets are the way forward, or should we still have bigger fleets with separate jets for specific roles? Well, most fleets everywhere have been multi-role. I mean, the big exception is the A-10. So, and then some people will argue it is somewhat multi-role because it does like the FAC role, and it does escort for search and rescue. So SAR escort, or CSAR, combat SAR escort. But really, I guess there's somewhat multi-role. But it's not an air-to-air. It's not a deep strike aircraft. So it is, from a cost effectiveness point of view, most air forces in the world cannot afford to have anything but multi-role aircraft. Let's face it, and having multi-role aircraft makes it easier for maintenance, for the spare parts, supply lines, supply chains. It's easier to train people on the one type of aircraft. So if you have the fewer types of aircraft you have in your fleet, the cheaper it's going to get to maintain and to train, different pilots. So, there are advantages, and that's why, most, it's just more cost effective. Plus, let's say you have a dedicated CAS aircraft like the A-10, which, has a fantastic reputation and, richly deserved as far as the CAS role. But let's say you fight a war where there's not going to be a lot of CAS. But now, what are you going to do with those jets? Or that's also been actually, I talk about the A-10, but let's not forget the F-15A and F-15C. F-15A hasn't been used for a long time, but I said the F-15E, so the Gray Eagle, the pure air-to-air and not the pound for air-to-ground Eagles. That's been to their detriment, and that's why there's not very many F-15Cs left in the active duty. There are quite a few in the Guard. On Air National Guard, but active duty is not very many. And one of the main reasons is, even though they've been retrofitted with an active array, radars and new systems and things like that, but the reason is they are single role air-to-air. And guess what? We've had a pretty easy way of maintaining air superiority in the last conflicts, and so an aircraft that only does air-to-air is not nearly as useful as you would think. I mean, it's not completely, it's useful, and in Desert Storm, they did very well. But when like in a conflict like Afghanistan or Iraq, where there is no air-to-air threat, what's an F-15C going to do? Nothing. They're at least the F-22 has some capability for air-to-ground ordnance, so it's limited, but at least it's got some. So we can talk about the A-10. So I think overall the future is more for multi-role, particularly in the era of constrained budgets. That's going to be the way to go. So love the A-10, love the F-15C, but let's face it, I think the future is more like multi-role. So let's see. Bill says that cemetery is Cambridge American Cemetery. That's right. Mattingly. That's right. That's what it is. You're exactly right. you're refreshing my memory, and you're 100% correct. I shall certainly. Oh, that's right, because that's Mac. Okay. Yeah, for the model tour. Yeah, we should make that happen. I think people would be interested. So let's see. Let's see. Rick, thanks. Let's see. Any country still using the F-111? That's Henry Lee asking that. And well, unfortunately, no. No, they're all in museums. The Australia was the last country to use it. Well, they were first of all, there were only two countries that ever used it, U.S. and Australia. So let's get that straight. And the U.S. retired their last F-111s, and I think they were the EF-111 electronic warfare version in 1997. I'm pretty sure that's accurate. I think the last F-111s bomb droppers, I think, was 96. I could be off by 1 year, but. And then Australia retired theirs, I think December 2010 was the last flight of an F-111 on active duty in the Australian Air Force, Royal Australian Air Force. So it's been a while. I know, unfortunately, nobody is using it anymore. So, well, unfortunately, I mean, its time had gone, and I think it'd still be a fantastically capable aircraft, except for non-stealth. But if you just put a phased array radar and a new, instead of the PAVTAC, put a smaller laser guidance system in there, a new INS, and everything. It would be, because it has a long range. Period. I mean, it has fantastic range even without external tanks, and it can carry a lot of ordnance. So just based on those two factors, the airframe itself, and also very fast. You still can't make it turn very well, but yeah, it would be a very, very capable aircraft with new avionics today, even now. Now, again, we talked about the maintenance. Well, new avionics would make it somewhat easier to maintain, but it's not going to change the hydraulic system or the fuel system and all that stuff. So it'd still be a little harder to maintain than modern aircraft. But, let's see. The Freckle Puny asks, have you ever gone as fast as Mach 3 in an F-111? Yeah, no, anybody that tells you you're going with Mach 3 in the F-111 is, and I don't think did Jeff Gwynne actually say that? You cannot go Mach 3 in the F-111, period. It's way above the max book limit is Mach 2.5, but the main reason is you would melt part of the aircraft. Absolutely no doubt about it. So anybody that tells you that is no, that either they had a Mach meter malfunction or something. But I had no doubt you could go slightly above Mach 2.5 under ideal condition. But first of all, you're not supposed to. And Mach 3, no way, absolutely no. I think I had some exchange of comments in comment sections with somebody who was just reporting this. I said, yeah, I understand you're not the one claiming that, but anybody who claims that. No, it can't be. I really seriously doubt. I watched the Jeff Gwynne interview. I think he had several appearances, so I seriously doubt he would have said something like that. I don't know.
So jump in here, Carl. But yeah, I don't think Jeff Gwynne actually said that. He definitely didn't say that in his interviews. I think it was hearsay kind of thing.
Yeah, no, that's yeah. No,
so
anyway.
So, Carl, if you want to answer maybe two more questions while we wrap up this great Q&A.
All right. Sure. I could go on forever. But yeah, we got other things to do in life. So, but yeah, we should definitely, let's where are we? Oh, yeah. So, Alexander Vata, or Vater, I don't know if he's German, but asks, oh no, actually he's answering Henry Lee about nobody else flying the F-111 still. So, okay, which is correct. So Timberwolf, if you could design a fighter based on your current tech, on current tech, how would it look and what would it have? Oh boy, that's the very involved question. But well, obviously, I think stealth. I think stealth is super important. So. You're not going to be, you're not going to hear me say, people say, oh, stealth is not really good. because there's these infrared systems that can detect stealth aircraft at, blah, blah, blah. And there's these new radar systems that can detect it. Well, I'll say, well, answer this, and why is everybody in the world that has the capability developing stealth fighters now? I mean, everybody, the Chinese, the Russians. In fact, the Russians now have that latest, the so-called Sukhoi 75 Checkmate, which is still just a mock-up, but supposedly will eventually be a real aircraft. But the French or the Europeans, the RAF with the Tempest, and the French/Germans with the FCAS. I mean, the Koreans, the Japanese, everybody's on board. So if stealth is not useful, please explain to me why that is. Okay, so maybe it's not as, I'll say this. Yeah, it doesn't make aircraft completely invisible, and it's not a panacea for everything. It doesn't make you invincible. But is it extremely useful? Yes, it is, and it will remain so for the foreseeable future. So, don't let anybody else tell you otherwise. But so it would definitely be a design that would incorporate stealth, which means it has to be shaped for stealth. Yeah, I'm sure by now everybody knows that in certain frequency bands, the shape of the aircraft is the most critical factor. That's why when you hear people say, "Oh, but this Typhoon," Typhoon's a great aircraft. Certainly, as a dogfighter, it's probably unparalleled. Maybe the F-22 could match it, but close to even. But as a pure dogfighter, the Typhoon is fantastic. But it's definitely not stealth. I mean, yeah, you can put some RAM, radar absorbing material on it, but just looking at its shape, it's about as bad as it can get for an aircraft that can go Mach 2. So that's all I'll say about that. The Typhoon definitely is not designed for any kind of stealth. You can reduce the radar cross section to some extent, but you can only do so much. So that would be a huge factor for me, which also means internal carriage of weapons. But you know what? Okay, to make this very long answer a little shorter, I mentioned earlier, I think, the design that was being talked about for a while, and that was called the FB-22. And it was sort of like a version of the F-22 that had a cranked arrow delta, kind of like a big F-16 XL, except instead of a single vertical fin, it had two of them. Or in some design, they had no, like B-2 style, it had no vertical fins at all for extra stealth. So I've seen both designs. I saw proposals where it had fins kind of like the F-22 has, but it had this huge cranked arrow delta wing and carried like twice the fuel at least, and twice the armament of an F-22. And I thought that looks super cool. I think that'd be my design right there. That'd be something like that, I guess. So that's probably the short answer I could give to this very complicated question. So if you can look up FB-22, and if you look it up online, there'll be several different designs that were proposed. So they don't necessarily all look the same, but the one that has a cranked arrow wing or something close to what the F-16 XL was, the one I'm talking about, I think that would have looked super cool and be very, very useful. Let's see, Timberwolf. Also, do you have any good memories visiting foreign air forces? Oh, yes, I have many, many. That would take us, I don't know, I could talk for a long time about this. Always had great interaction with a number of foreign air forces. French Air Force, Belgian Air Force. I mentioned in one of my earlier interviews that I did a squadron exchange for a couple of weeks with the Belgian Air Force at Florence at the time when they were flying Mirage 5s. By the way, Mac, I need to send you a picture of me in front of the Mirage 5 when I was at Florence just before my flight in the two-seater in the back seat.
Yeah, for sure.
I can send you that for a future video. But I also interacted with people. I mean, a lot of the interaction was not necessarily when I was actually in the flying squadron. It was when I was on the staff, like at Ramstein. I worked in NATO a lot, so I interacted with pilots and air crews from everywhere. One of the coolest stories, this is incredible. but I was in an exercise. So this was not a flying exercise, it was a command post exercise. But I was sitting next to a German pilot who had been he flew, I want to, maybe I'm getting this part wrong, but I'm pretty sure he flew the Tornado in the Luftwaffe. But at the time he was at the exercise, he was on an exchange tour with the French Air Force flying Mirage F-1s. But then we got into a conversation and he said, well, I previously had an exchange tour because I think initially he was in the Marineflieger flying Tornadoes. And then, so he got an exchange tour flying Super Étendards in the French Navy, of all places. So because it was Marineflieger, of course, Germans don't have aircraft carriers, but he got to fly Super Étendards, and he was qualified by the French Navy to fly off the carrier. And I got into the conversation and say, hey, well, yeah, I saw a video on YouTube of the Super Étendard flying off the carrier, French carrier, the Charles de Gaulle. And right after it's catapulted, it goes up straight up and then stalls, and the guy punches out. And I think I read in the comment that it was a German exchange pilot. He said, yeah, that was me. So I was just like, oh, well, that's strange. So you were the guy. He said, yeah. And, of course, he punched out just in time. I mean, by the time he punches out, and he told me the story. He says he wasn't, necessarily his fault. He was being catapulted with a light fuel weight, and I guess the center of gravity was not something he was used to, and so that caused some issues right after launch, and he got into a stall and tried to recover, but punched out just in time that he made it and survived. Was picked up out of the water. But that was one of the most interesting stories that I'd ever heard, or coincidences. So yeah, I saw this YouTube video. I said, yeah, I was the guy that punched out in that video. So yeah, tons of interactions. Always great. All these air forces, ton of interaction with the Netherlands Air Force, Belgian Air Force, RAF. Almost got a flight in the backseat of a Hawk one time at RAF Valley, but ended up being canceled for, I can't remember if it was maintenance or some other reason, but I was all ready to go get a backseat flight in the Hawk at RAF Valley in Wales, but that got canceled at the last minute. So anyway, all right. So I see Mike's friendly face here, so that must mean that we're getting close to finishing. Again, I think you kind of sense that I could talk about this stuff forever, but maybe some other time.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you very much, Karl, for coming on the show. It's been an absolutely great Q&A. And for those folks who, joined in, yes, me and Karl will talk about some sort of video of his models and his office. If you're up for that, Karl, we'll obviously sort that out in the future, which will be great. But thank you very much, guys, for coming on. And it's always great to see you guys in the comments. And thank you for making this channel a great place to be. But thank you very much, Karl, for joining us. It's been an absolute pleasure.
And thank you in return for inviting me. And again, my pleasure. Anytime you want. Again, I think your channel is fantastic. You're doing a great job. And
thank you.
It's cool.
Absolutely, yeah. I'm sure we're going to get Karl on soon. So thank you very much, guys. But we're going to leave it there and enjoy your afternoon, whatever you're doing. So thank you very much.
Okay, bye, everybody.
Cheers.
See you next time.